Losing bets. We will discuss what that means concerning Iowa football and the needs now in the running back room. Welcome into Hawkeyes Live right here at the Voice of College Football. We do appreciate you stopping by here each and every Tuesday, 5:30 Eastern, 4:30 where it counts, including where Corey Bratta is seated, I believe, there from the Hawkeye of the Storm, of course. Corey,
Yes,
how you doing today?
this is the headquarters, Mark.
I
This is the
somewhat
official
recognized
headquarters.
it.
Yeah, I'm good. Trying to think what's hot off the presses of Hawkeyeville besides the Ladell Betts news, which is obviously huge. So we'll get to that. Ironic that we just previewed the running backs this past week. They announced the spring date today, so that's official. The open practice. It's never a spring game, but that is taking place on April 26th in Kinnick Stadium. So that's something fans can punch on their calendars. It's literally 2 months away. So it'll sneak up on us before you know it. And hopefully we'll have warmer weather. It's been nice here the last couple of days here in Iowa. It's supposed to stay relatively nice after the Arctic blast that we received. So, yeah, that's positive. And March Madness fast approaching. The women are, I think, are pretty good shape. I mentioned that they've lost 2 straight, but they've both been to really good top 10 teams and played both of those teams down to the wire. You love it if you could have gotten one of those. The men are just on life support, so we'll see. They play at Illinois tonight, and yeah, life support. I guess if they still won there, they keep their glimmer of hope alive, but I don't count on that. So we'll see. We got post-game coverage on the platform tonight after the Hawkeyes and the Illini.
Kirk and the football program, they are ahead of the curve when it comes to spring football because you may have noticed the number of top programs are canceling spring games, not going to play spring games this spring. I commented on the last show that we did this afternoon on the national channel that I would mandate as commissioner of college football, but of course everyone can make up their own rules. I'll be at a conference, a program, whatever they want to do concerning this type of situation, but I would mandate a spring game. And well, Iowa fills that need to the extent that for the fans that want to go to the game that maybe can't afford or don't have the opportunity to go to a regular season game, they have a fan experience. So that is my number one objective concerning spring football, is not that it's on TV for people to watch a spring football game, because it's not a football game. It's number one about the fans being able to experience the football team when there are families out there that do not have the opportunity financially or logistically to do so during the fall.
What would be wrong with actually playing a exhibition style game in the spring in place of a prototypical spring game or open practice?
Well, I think the injury factor, but obviously they do that, in private. There are sessions, obviously they're going full go.
I'm talking about, but I'm talking about between different programs.
Well,
I mean, if you're gonna go full pads at some point, why not get the fan really? Because look, if you're gonna try to get people in seats for this open spring practice or spring game, I know Iowa's sort of been an anomaly as it relates to how they format their open practice, open game. But I'm just saying, like, why not? Or you could play UNI. Hey, Iowa could play Northern Iowa. Hey, this would be an opportunity where playing a bunch of FCS schools may not be a horrible thing. I don't know if the FCS schools, they might say it's not worth, because we get, they normally get paid to go play somewhere. I don't know how that would work, but I would certainly think that'd be intriguing. Be a way to spice up the long off season.
I would think that the big program in this case would not see that as being beneficial, because you put yourself in a position that if you lose, you look bad, but you don't want to put in the kind of effort to win the game necessarily. You're out there to practice, to work on situations and skill sets and all of that.
But it doesn't count. So it's
I know it doesn't count, but it just looks bad. It would look bad if Iowa lost to Northern Iowa in a scrimmage.
I'll tell you what would look. I tell you what would look pretty good. Selling $20 tickets times 60,000 seats, which is what, $180,000 just on
1.8 million.
No, I'm sorry. Yeah, I put the decimal point in the wrong spot. So, I mean, I'm just telling you, I mean, think about it. That's $20 a seat. You're telling me they couldn't sell that out? They could sell that out. Yeah, I don't know if the money would be there to, because you got to pay somebody to do that. I mean, it's not like these schools are just going to, well, I mean, maybe they would do it voluntarily. Hey, maybe you and I could allocate a third of the stadium or a fourth of the stadium, whatever it is. And hey, it's not a long drive. I don't know. I think there's ways you can probably do it. I know football's a little, hey, they're playing all these extra games now at the playoff. And now the Big Ten's talking about having multiple games on conference championship weekend. So I just, it'd be cool to spice it up because it's the longest off season. Even with the playoff extended, it's the longest off season in sports.
I didn't know where you were headed with us taking a quarter of the stadium. To do what?
I'm just saying they could take a quarter of the stadium and reserve it they could sell it through their ticket office. Basically what I'm saying. I'm just trying to think of a way so that it doesn't seem like a no-win for a you and I to come play. It's not, it would never have to be like a raucous, it's not meant to be a raucous environment. It'd be an environment for families, for maybe some students. But I mean, again, as an exhibition, I just think people would treat it like they treat going to a spring game, but I just think you could get a better turnout, potentially.
And lost in all that, what is the date of Iowa spring practice?
April 26th.
April 26th is the spring / game, the family day.
Practice. Yeah. No, it's not. That's kids' day in the summer. That's the open practice in August. That's the kids' day is open practice in August. It's just the open spring practice.
That is the finale.
Correct.
When do they start spring practice? Do we know that?
Well, I'll do the math. I don't have the official date in front of me. Great question. Every year you ask me that, and I'm always like, how many weeks?
Your approach is to get down there at some point during spring practice and then maybe get back down there for the finale, whatever they call it.
Well, yeah, I'll at least be there for the open practice on the 26th. But yes, and it depends. If I don't know that there'll be extensive, there's always media availability. And for a while they were making athletes and coaches available on Zoom. I don't know what their plan is for this spring. I'll try to find those spring dates, Mark.
Have you thought about going to Iowa State for spring practice since they're right down the street?
For what purpose?
Just to cover it, just for one day, not hang out there for 3 weeks, but to go for maybe one practice.
Yeah, I guess fans are probably going to see. A lot of times I say things about Iowa State and fans get on me about it because I'm a closet clone. But I don't see any purpose in doing that, frankly, Mark. There's nobody on the team anymore that I really care about. I'm not saying that like I don't, care about their safety. That's not. I'm just saying in the past I've known people either on staff or on the roster. I really don't now. So I guess I could do that. See, here's the difference between you and me. I am not a college football junkie. All right. I really am not. I mean, as much as maybe you act like I am in some cases, and I love college football, but I watch less of it than a lot of people, than probably most people. Part of it's because of the show. I didn't used to be that way. I used to watch a lot of college football, but I don't know, going to cover, it'd be like, Iowa State, the men's basketball team is top 10. They've been top 10 in the country all year. I haven't been to a single Iowa State basketball game this year. I know I got a friend of mine from Cedar Rapids who's come over for an Iowa State basketball. He's a huge Hawkeye fan. He wants to see a top 10 team. I'm like, I don't care. I've watched like 1 or 2 Iowa State games because they've been on TV and I've had nothing else to do. So, what I love is when Iowa plays an event in Ames. That's what I love. When the Cyhawk game is in Ames, because then I'm able to be there and be there as a fan. I've been there as a fan. I've never covered a Cyhawk game formally as a media member. I'm there in the arena or in the stadium, and I enjoy that. I will say this, Iowa State, you probably don't know anything about this because you're not here, but Iowa State's putting a lot of money in this new Cytown thing. And it sounds like they're trying to sort of make it look like what the outside of the T-Mobile Center in Kansas City is, where they have the Big 12 tournament. They're going to have businesses. They're going to have I don't know how to describe it. It's supposed to be like a big fan hangout on game day, but there's a lot of money being put into the construction of that facility / blueprint. And So that'll be interesting. Just it's been interesting kind of see the construction going for the last year. Really, they've done a lot of work with the lots, and I don't know when the actual structures are going to be built, but it's going to be interesting. I know there's some controversy about tax dollars and what's being. I don't know who's. I don't even know what's funding that. How that works. If that's all. If that's all Iowa State athletic department money, or I don't know. I don't know. I'd have to do research on that again. I don't care. If I cared more, I'd know, Mark. Hey, should I go get my baseball cards out? We can do that. We can just
Not today.
totally let's just trash the whole programming message. You think people got upset when they had to listen to that late last week during our show?
Well, I don't care if they got upset. I think it's a great. I will do that sometime. We'll
Yeah.
obviously
Do
you've
it.
got to clear out your basketball schedule, so we got to wait until at least April. That's a great May, June type
Although
get together.
the women are not projected to go to the national championship for the third straight year, and the men aren't going to projected to make the NCAA tournament. So I may be freer earlier than expected. And by the way, I'm okay with that. I want the Hawkeyes to go as far as possible. I hope the women make it to the second weekend, maybe even to the third weekend. Unlikely, but hope it happens. But man, I made this comment to our lovely women's basketball co-host the other day, Kasheen Alexander. I said, man, talk about Caitlin Clark playing a lot of basketball because of the way the seasons work out. She played in 2 straight national championships. Then the draft is like right after the end of women's college basketball. It's really stupid because then they start the season shortly after the draft. It's bizarre for rookies to have to go from playing an entire college season, in her case, deep into the postseason to the final game. And then all of a sudden, so people talk about her taking the Olympic break. I'm guessing those were some of the best weeks of her life since college, just because of the toll it takes on a person's body. And from a person that covers it, nothing like that. But man, it was a lot of basketball to cover. And then also as a Mavs fan and watching the Mavs make a run to the NBA finals last year, just a lot of basketball. I didn't watch any Indiana Fever, and I've had people, why aren't you watching the Fever? I'm like, again, not to say I don't care. I'll probably try to watch them a little bit more this year because of the Caitlin Clark thing, but you just kind of get a little, at least I do, a little burnout after a while.
That's what happens when you forge a league that you don't consider to be legitimate. So when the WNBA started, they knew that they couldn't compete against the NBA or college basketball. Therefore, they started in the summer.
Yeah, and I understand. Excuse me. I understand that. I understand the reasons why, but there's got to be some adjustments made. And I don't know, when Caitlin was first drafted and you and I talked about, okay, what's the impact going to have on the sport? I don't know. Obviously, it's had a really positive impact. To what extreme? To what extent? I don't know. But is it enough to where you can? Because that's got to change at some point. Because the thing about it is, though, they line up with college football anyways. They go into October. I think their playoffs are October, November. So who cares? I mean, start it earlier. Start it during college basketball. People are in basketball mode. Start it in March and be done in August. I don't know. I think the summer is a good time to play, but can you figure out a way to have a draft to where you get drafted in May and then you have the rest of the season? I don't know if that's too long of a break.
Yeah, it's not fair to the athletes, but it's not geared toward the athletes. It's geared toward the fans and the profitability of the league, which is to not compete against other basketball that they are in the best position they've ever been in to compete against. Finally, now because of Caitlin Clark and maybe a few others, but primarily her and her alone.
Right.
One quick note on spring practice. It's kind of snuck up on me. We did a Clemson segment this week. We did Alabama today, and them mentioning, hey, spring practice is starting on Friday. It kind of snuck up on me with the late national championship game. I may sneak out and try to get to like Florida State, Florida, UCF's just an hour away from me, and maybe cover, because I am a college football junkie. Maybe I will go to these other spring practices possibly.
Well, why don't you go over to South Florida as well? Go down to Tampa. Go cover the bowls.
Well, first of all, even when I mention UCF, which is the most convenient for me, I don't know that anyone cares that I go to UCF and get a bunch of player interviews and practice footage from UCF. Don't
Well,
know
maybe
that
not.
anyone cares about that.
Yeah.
I may do it anyway, just to get out and meet some new people and spread the word of the voice of college football. But Gainesville's probably 2 hours away. Tallahassee's more like 3.5.
How far is
Miami's a lot further than I thought it was. It's like 4
well,
plus.
how far is Tampa if you were to go cover
It's about
USF?
3 hours.
That's not a bad program. And you could go over to Clearwater. You could go check out St. Pete and maybe even go down to Siesta Keys.
Well, I understand that. You're making it into a vacation. I'm talking
Yeah.
about a business
Well, but
trip.
you can combine business and pleasure.
Florida State and Florida are worthy trips, and they're closer.
Okay. All right. Well,
So
then
we
don't
would
do it,
start with
Mark.
Florida and go to Florida State. We got our Clemson credentials this week. We heard back from Clemson. So we got some Clemson football spring practice credentials,
Okay.
which
I, I'm
somewhat
look
surprised me.
I'm looking here at the spring practice. I'm trying to find the official start date. So frustrating because you would think it would be easier to find, right?
You
But
would think so.
I don't recall getting any. I
Iowa
don't.
spring practice start. That's what I would put in Google.
Well, yeah, I've done that, and all I can find is the news today that when the spring game is, the open practice.
Okay.
I know. Yeah, I don't know. I'll keep looking for this.
Our buddy Jackson stopping by here. We appreciate Jackson, of course. Corey, I tell you what, I told Mark last night, and what I told Feinbaum this afternoon, don't ever use Chat GPT when researching the history of college football.
Okay. All right.
A lesson from Jackson. By the way, that's reminding me that we missed you last night. We had the
Oh,
State of the Voice of College Football and would have loved to have had you stop by and honor us, but you were too busy.
You know what? I did see you live at one point, and I was a little tied up, but yeah, I would have loved to have been there. So in the past, real quick, the spring practice has gone exactly well. Like this case, it was March 22nd to April 21st of 2017. So in that case, just trying to see how many weeks is that? 4, 5 weeks? How many? I can't do math. Well, it'd be. Help me out here, Mark. March 22nd. This is 2017.
It's about 4 weeks.
I'm just looking at the so I can have it in my own head. Yeah, March 22nd to April 21st. So yeah, in the past they've started on a Wednesday, and yeah, so if we're sticking to that, then I would guess since this year they're finishing on the 26th, so that means they're starting on the 26th. Why am I? That can't be right.
We're in the weeds at this point.
Yeah, I'm guessing they start on March 25th or 26th, or 27th, somewhere in there, that week.
Okay, so it's going to be a while. All right.
Yeah, I would think.
All right, folks, before we get to the news of the day, would like to let everyone know here that you can partner here at the Voice of College Football, get your business, product, service, or personal brand to the next level by partnering here with the Voice of College Football. Let's discuss how you also can reach your target audience. Check out the experience of one of our current partners posted there on the screen. We are here to deliver for you. Contact us at sponsorships at vocfb.com. We will leave that link there in the chat again. It's just simply sponsorships at vocfb.com. That brings us to the Ladell Betts news, which, of course, that's one of those deals where, to me, it's difficult to get a full valuation of how much was it recruiting, how much was it development by that particular coach, or just the players developing themselves and taking it upon themselves in terms of really gauging the performance of a position coach to say that success or failure was because of that position coach. But obviously, Iowa's had a pretty impressive run under Ladell Betts, who did 4 seasons. Of course, he's an all-time great, and of course now moves on to the New York Giants.
Yeah, I think development, recruiting, it's, some of that's, I guess, subjective, but I look at the people that he brought in, and we've been really excited about some of these running backs, Mark, from Caleb Johnson with his size when they flipped him from Cal to Jazz Patterson. I remember talking about Jazz, and I didn't know so you don't know what some of these guys are going to do physically, what kind of weight they're going to be able to put on. A guy like Akram Wadley was electric at Iowa, but he wasn't able to put on weight. Tyler Goodson got a little bit bigger, but I think struggled getting real big, although he's found a role in the NFL with the Colts. But I remember comparing Jazz Patterson to a young Sean Green. Now, he never has filled into that frame, so to speak, and I don't know that he will. I just don't know that he's going to be that type of a runner. But, boy, he hits hard. We're going to see what he can do this year, assuming he sticks around. So, I think it's a combination of both. He's had young guys ready. Kamari Moulton played as a true freshman. Caleb Johnson, Jazz Patterson, they were playing as true freshmen. Tyler Goodson was playing early. So I just think we've seen it's hard to really look at anything that he did or didn't do and be real critical of it. He was real productive in the state of Florida. He found diamonds in the rough in guys like TJ Washington and Kamari Moulton, able to land solid 4-star, 3/4-star prospects in Patterson, Johnson. They had the kid that ended up flipping to North Carolina State. That was, I guess you could say, a miss on his part because they had him committed and he flipped. That's going to happen in recruiting. I really like Brevin Dahl. Yeah, he's an in-state kid. Haven't seen anything from him yet, but he could have went to Iowa State or elsewhere. He picked Iowa. We don't know yet about Nate McNeil, but it's a blow. I mean, if I was to pick anybody on the offensive side of the football to lose as it relates to a non-head coach, non-offensive coordinator, I think I'd have to pick everybody but him. I mean, I don't know that Abdul Hodge is indispensable. I just, he's a converted linebacker that came to a program, or I should say a former linebacker who's coaching tight ends. And I'm not saying he's done a bad job, but I think he's learned on the job. And I'm sure he learned a little from Brian because Brian coached tight ends. And, it's a position now that's sort of, at least last year, they took a step back as far as volume, whether that's just a result of personnel or I think it's more so a result of the slight stylistic change with this new offense and the new coordinator. So, man, I would rather lose Abdul. I would have rather lose George Barnett. Some people may think I'm crazy on that. I've seen one impressive season from the offensive line, and that was this year. And I still don't think they were good in pass pro. So, sounds like there was interest for George Barnett from other franchises / programs, and he stuck around. I know other people were interested in a couple guys on the defensive side, and of course LeVar Woods and Phil Parker. But who else am I missing on the offensive side? John Budmeyer. You know how I feel about that. I mean, hey, the wide receiver room did okay last year. I give him some credit for that. I tend to give Tim Lester more credit because of his track record. And again, John Budmeyer is a guy who didn't play the position as coaching. Ladell Betts was a terrific player and did a lot of good things from the development side, from the recruiting side. His players loved him. I remember talking with a couple of the guys, and he's had guys leave, like LaShawn Williams left. I don't remember if Tyrone Tracy, Ladell would have been there with Tyrone Tracy, but of course Tracy was playing receiver, and I don't know how much of a chance he ever had at playing running back if he just didn't want to play running back at Iowa. Of course, he eventually converted over to running back at Purdue. So guys have left, but everybody talks about how much of a family atmosphere he creates. You and I have talked about how he's been able to hang on to his top 3 to 4 guys over the last couple of seasons, which is surprising because they've all been guys that look to be Big Ten level starters. Up until this past year, we hadn't seen anybody emerge as an all-conference back, but we saw that this past year. And to this point, through the first transfer portal window of the offseason, nobody's left besides LeSean Williams, who had already decided that he'd be leaving. So, as we talked about last week, Jazz Patterson's back, Kamari Moulton's back, Brevin Dahl, Nate McNeil comes in, Xavier Williams is back. Does everybody stick around? They're going to have a chance to compete in the spring, and then they'll have another portal window. I'd just be throwing darts in the dark if I was to tell you yes or no on that, because I don't know who they're going to hire. My guess is Kirk has an idea. Who knows how long this has been in the works? But Kirk had to know that Ladell was, he's done a good. I think we weren't surprised that the Giants. Were you surprised when you saw that the Giants would be interested in hiring him based on what he's done at Iowa? I mean, he's a former NFL guy. He was a successful player at that level, has been really good at Iowa. No scandals, nothing like that. So, yeah, I mean, he's a solid hire for a franchise that needs help at running back. And it's interesting. You know who he's being paired with? Did you see that? He's actually being reunited with Steve Ferentz, who's coaching defensive line, assistant defensive line. And then James Ferentz is an assistant offensive line coach for the Giants. And Tyrone Tracy, who, ironically enough, again, the word on the street is that he didn't want to play running back. Who knows if that's true? He's playing running back for the Giants, former Hawkeye receiver. So some irony in all that. But anyways, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see who they go after. The first thing I said yesterday on my on the video I published on my channel was in the past we've all been guilty of this. When somebody leaves Iowa, we automatically think former player. Who can we get? Former player. Chuck Long. Chuck Long's going to coach the offense. Let's see. Marvin McNutt's going to coach receivers. Let's just calm down a little bit. I don't know that's where they should go. And of course, I knew before I even saw any of it. As soon as I they do they do it with your videos too? They comment on the video before they even watch it. They commented on it before they even watch it. Albert Young, hire Albert Young. What has Albert Young done? Listen, Albert Young was a terrific back in 2005. I believe he led the Big Ten in rushing in 2005. But he has not proven it anywhere close to this level. I think he's coaching somewhere, D2? I'd have to go look at where he's at currently. I know he's a big Hawkeye. He's through and through Hawkeye. One thing I mentioned yesterday, and I think it's fair to bring this up, all right, at this stage in Kirk Ferentz's career. This is not a vindictive comment on my part. But I do wonder, because I'm sure you could bring up anecdotal examples of guys that Kirk Ferentz has either brought into the program to advise or to speak or to be a captain. I have to go back and trace that since 2020, but you know where I'm going with this. Guys that spoke up, whether you want to say against the program or along side by side with their brothers in arms in 2020 regarding the allegations of racial disparities. I just wonder, what is Kirk Ferentz's relationship with those guys? And I'm not saying he's not amiable with those guys. And the reason I bring it up is because Albert Young did speak out in support of his teammates. I'm not saying he was ripping Iowa. And I for the record, yesterday people were throwing out that name. I thought, I'm going to go back and see if I can find what Albert Young said. And I went back, and I'll admit that I went back and tried to find that post on his social media. Could not find it, but there are articles written that basically cite Albert Young as talking about how the culture at Iowa prevented some former black players from returning to Iowa and feeling welcome at Iowa. I'm not saying he said that about himself, but about other people. And I just wondered, the fact that he even said that, and then you had the lawsuit that eventually ended up in a settlement. I know you're wincing a little bit, but I wonder, these are human beings, and Kirk's a human being. And he may prove me wrong. Maybe he goes out and hires Albert Young. And if he doesn't hire Albert Young, it may not have anything to do with that. But I do think to go out and hire someone that maybe was on the other side of that issue might take a little humble pie.
This is why I'm wincing, and I may be completely off base here. So let's say I own an organization. Well, maybe I do, but anyway, or own an organization where people are bought in of all different ethnicities, two genders, etc. maybe a certain group of people don't feel there's a difference between being disrespected, mistreated, and maybe a difference between that, which is wrong, and maybe being a bit unaware or blind to creating an environment that they feel culturally comfortable. You know what I mean?
Oh, I know. This we could go revert right back to the conversations we had about the 2020 scandal. I'm just saying, how did Kirk perceive every one of those athletes, former athletes specifically, not the guys that were still with his program, because those guys were with the program. He wasn't going to cut those guys because they made statements. Because like guys like Kayvon Merriweather and wasn't Gavin Williams, a couple of those guys back in 2020, they spoke up. I don't know that they spoke up against the program, but they wanted to be cogs for change. And I think Kirk was supportive of that. At least that's what he said publicly. But I just wonder, all the guys that spoke out specifically on social media, I'm talking Carl Davis, Jaleel Johnson, Jordan Lomax was really well respected of the program. He spoke up. I mean, there were a lot. I mean, a laundry list of guys that spoke up. DJK. I don't know that Marvin. I mean, there were some guys that came to Kirk's defense, but I'm just saying, I remember Albert Young as one of those guys that I'm like, oh, he made a comment because I'd say he's one of the greats under Kirk Ferentz. He never made it in the NFL. He had a cup of coffee, but never really stuck. And I know like I say, he's a very big Hawkeye fan. He's a proud Hawkeye, but it's not a matter of sorry, there's a box elder-bug that somehow got into my studio. It's not a matter of do I think Albert Young would be interested in the job. It's a matter of this late in Kirk Ferentz's career, does he bring in someone that perhaps he feels was in any way disloyal to him? I'm not saying he would or he wouldn't. I don't know. So I'm not trying to make out like I know Kirk Ferentz is a vindictive person. That's not what I'm saying. But we're all humans. And is it possible that there are some unsettled feelings there? I don't know, because I've not heard Kirk speak on individuals like Albert Young since then. I'm sure he would compliment Albert Young for the person that he is and that for the athlete that he was. Maybe he'd even bring him back to be an honorary captain. But would he hire him to be his running backs coach? Is that a fair question, Mark? Am I out of line for bringing that up?
No, you're not out of line. There's a lot of conjecture there, but it's reasonable conjecture.
Yeah. So I don't, but all in all, I think it's unlikely. People, my whole point in bringing this up is I think fans like to jump onto former players. Like Sean Green would never be a candidate because he just doesn't, I don't even know what he's doing. He's not coaching anywhere. Albert Young's coached. Hey, I brought up DJK. He's coached running backs and receivers for I don't know how many years now, and I kind of laughed at that because DJK Kirk's never even brought him back. I don't know that there would ever even be. My understanding, those guys haven't talked in well over a decade. So
I don't remember him.
Darrell Johnson Koulianos.
Oh, okay. I was
Sorry.
picturing DJ KAY, and I was thinking, who's that?
No. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
He's coached running backs, even though he's a former wide receiver. So yeah. I would guess it's going to be someone else. Kirk's got lots of NFL connections, as does Tim Lester. And frankly, I'd like Lester, even though he's not a former running back. He knows people, and he's a younger guy. Maybe I hope Kirk gives him an opportunity, unlike he did with Bud Meyer, to select who he thinks would work best with the group and with the offense.
There are college football fans, and then there are you addicts out there that love it so much you love the recruiting game. We've got a recruiting channel here at the Voice of College Football, so you need to be aware of that. There's a lot of great clips there. We do a show each and every Tuesday, this same very day, Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Myself and Leanne Herring, who has a wealth of experience in the recruiting game, we get together to talk recruiting across college football. That's every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time.
And by the way, Michael in the chat says, how about Tavian Banks? I think that's very unlikely. I know Tavian. I think that's very unlikely. Do I think Tavian would be a good candidate? Yeah, I do. Don't expect that to happen.
Because of the issues you just raised?
No, nothing.
Okay.
Nothing regarding 2020. But I can tell you there has been interest from Tavian's side in the past, and I just don't think that's going to happen. So he would be. He's a great dude, lives in Iowa, but he's not coaching. I don't think so. He's part of the Fry era. Let's not act like
Sure.
the Banks boys were brothers or something. Brad was in his own era and Tavian was on his own. So yeah, how many former Hayden Fry coaches has Kirk brought on? Let me ask you that question, Mark. How many?
How would I know that?
Well, just
I'd have
think
to think about it.
how many former Hayden Fry players or coaches has Kirk brought on?
I'd have to run through Iowa's coaching staff.
Well,
And
Chuck Long coached quarterbacks in 1999
okay.
for 1 year.
First year. Okay.
And with I believe it was with Kenny O'Keefe, and then he was gone. And I'm not saying has anything to do with. I'm not saying he left because of certain issues, but I think that was mutual when it happened. But I'm not recalling any specific former players under the Fry era or coaches that have been hired on by Kirk Ferentz. And I don't know how many have been interested, but I'm just saying in general that has not happened. I'd be shocked if a guy like Tavian Banks was brought back. Yeah, Erica brings up LeVar, but I'm not talking about guys who crossed over. Because didn't Ladell also cross over? Wasn't Ladell, I think he was probably recruited. I'd have to go back to, when did he come in? What was his first year at Iowa? I've talked to Coach Patterson about this before, but his first year at Iowa would have been 98. So, yeah, there was crossover there as well. I'm not talking about guys who were crossovers, right, that carried over from the Fry era, like LeVar and Ladell. I'm talking guys who are exclusively in that era. Now, they've recruited the kids and relatives of former Hayden Fry players and coaches, but not the other that I can remember.
Folks, we've taken on a different position each week with Corey as we head our way toward the beginning of spring practice, which is apparently the final week of March, we've determined. We've looked at the running back room with the assumption that Ladell Betts would be the coach, but check out that video. And of course, the other videos concerning the tight ends and the defensive line. And this week we attack wide receivers. Corey, I'm going to look at this or get this conversation started actually from kind of a backwards position here, because I was looking at the recruiting class for 2025 and considering that this is a pretty thin position to bring in only one wide receiver in the recruiting class, Terrence Smith from Illinois. He's probably not going to be a factor this year. And then Sam Phillips, only one portal player. Did they really do enough to fortify this room?
Well, they lost Caleb Brown. Right? Who am I missing? They lose someone else? They didn't lose anybody else, correct? They brought Caden Weegan back. He could have left. He's returning. I think he'll be used more so on offense this year. They brought their best receiver back in Jacob Gill. They brought their best young guy back in Reese Vanderzee. And then you brought up Sam Phillips. I think he comes in and is an automatic starter, assuming he stays healthy. I think he's that good. They brought back Seth Anderson. Yeah, you're wearing Hawkeye colors, the black.
We transformed the studio into Hawkeye Central here.
Yeah. Hey, Terrence Smith's a good ad, though, and I'll tell you why. He had offers from Iowa State, Minnesota, some good receiver schools. Now, Purdue, he had an offer there too, but it's hard for me to call them a receiver school ever since Brom left. But I like Terrence Smith. He was a big addition. Now, had they missed on him, again, depending on how the numbers would have worked out, remember they had to cut down. They actually lost a couple of walk-on receivers to the portal this year as well. But if they missed on Terrence Smith, I could have seen them go out and get another portal receiver. But I think they really like him. And Vanderzee proved last year that guys can play at that position in this offense early. So I don't know. I'm not concerned about that position like I'd be concerned about, uh, that same position 2 years ago, just because of who's at the helm in Tim Lester. I think he's working with that group more than people realize. And I think Caden Weejan's got upside on offense that we haven't seen explored yet. I don't think he's coming back just to be a special teams guy, which he basically was this year. He got very little action through the air. I mean, you see 3 catches for 46 yards and 4 carries for 33 yards. I think they'll use him a lot more on offense in the passing game. And then Dayton Howard's another guy, kind of flies under the radar, but with his size, if you want a typical X receiver, that might be as far as depth where they lack is having enough big receivers. You have Reese Vandersee, but who else? It's probably Dayton Howard, and then maybe it's Terrence Smith, the freshman from Aurora. And who am I missing? Yeah, I mean, like I said, Seth Anderson was hurt much of last year. He's had problems staying healthy ever since he transferred in from Charleston Southern. And KJ Parker, I've heard some good things about him. He's a young kid, also out of Illinois, who's got speed. He's not real big at 5'9", but again, they got a couple of smaller speedsters like Parker and Sam Phillips. And then, Jarrett Bowie also has played. So he's kind of that middling type of sized receiver right there with guys like Seth Anderson at 6'1". Apollo Payne is the only walk-on, I believe, on roster at this point at receiver. So that's a change. Again, they lost 2 guys last year. Graham Friedrichsen was one. And who else did they lose last year? Besides Friedrichsen, besides Caleb Brown, he of course transferred to UAB. But as far as walk-ons are concerned, it might have just been Judah Mallett. That's the kid from Texas, I believe. He also left, and I don't know where he ended up. I know Friedrichsen went to UNI. So they had to get the numbers down in the room in general. Could they have probably added another scholarship guy? Maybe. But I'm curious to see. Numbers haven't really resulted in a whole lot in the past. So if Tim Lester likes the guys he has, I like the guys he has. I like this room better than I liked the room last year. How could you not? You've seen what Jacob Gill has done now in a Hawkeye uniform. You bring in, and even from a volume standpoint, albeit at the FCS level, an even more productive transfer than Seth Anderson was or Jacob Gill was in Sam Phillips. And then you've seen what year one looked like for a healthy Reese Vandersee. Health is going to be, that seems to be a storyline with this room, with Seth Anderson, Jarrett Bowie, and those guys. So there should be lots of good competition. It seems like every spring in August, we talk about that position being a battle. But I'm excited to see what this group can do. I like the fact that they have some smaller speed guys.
Is Jacob Gill clearly the number 1 receiver?
No, not in my mind. I think he was the number 1 guy last year. I think the stats bear that out. I don't know. He may have had 1 drop all year that came in the bowl game. It was a big moment in the bowl game. It was unfortunate, but he was phenomenal last year as far as catch percentage. But I don't know that he's the best guy this year. I think that's got to all play out. They brought in Sam Phillips. They brought in a semi-highly touted kid in Terrence Smith. Freshman can play at wide receiver. And again, Seth Anderson was hurt much of last offseason. Can he stay healthy through spring, through fall? Can he get a full offseason to work? What does he look like if he does? Those are questions that I just don't have answers to. And again, they've got young guys who were coming on last year, and Dayton Howard and Jarrett Bowie. Terrell Washington Jr. is another one. Depending on who they bring in at running backs coach, that probably has some sort of a factor in how they play Terrell Washington Jr., but they played him as sort of a Swiss Army knife last year between running back and receiver. So he may get some run on the outside. I feel like I'm missing somebody in that mix. I guess I could pull up the Alex Moda would be another guy. We have not really seen him anywhere on the field. He had pretty good speed coming out of high school. He's a former quarterback. So he's another guy maybe they can figure out a way to utilize. And then I mentioned KJ Parker, who was a freshman last year. So, and then Caden Weejan. So I think the top 3 in my mind heading into the year, in my mind, Jacob Gill is definitely in the top 3. He's cemented starter. I have a hard time seeing Sam Phillips not being a top 3 guy. And because I think they probably want to have a taller receiver at that third spot, I'd probably go Vanderzee. But where does Keaton Weegan factor in? Where does Bowie and Seth Anderson and those guys? I don't know. That's good competition. I think they've got, or counting through there, I think they've got at least 5 or 6 guys, maybe 7 that could end up being starter guys that have seen legitimate playing time. They have one other walk-on I didn't mention, and that's Alex Eichmann, the one guy that they kept off scholarship that returned, in addition to Apollo Payne, the new freshman from Cedar Rapids. But I like the group. I really do. And I'm excited to see what Tim Lester can do with a full offseason with them.
And it sounds optimistic the way you frame it, but they have one guy who has produced significant numbers at this level, Jacob Gill.
Right.
But we've seen good things out of Reese Vanderzee.
We've seen flashes from Reese. We've seen flashes from Seth. Again, health has been a problem for both of those guys. And we've seen flashes from Dayton Howard and Jarrett Bowie. We've seen what Caden Weegan can do on special teams with his speed. I just have to think they're going to figure out a way to utilize that speed on offense. Don't you think, Mark? He was the best return guy in the country last year. I would just think punt return and kick return. I would just think there's a way to get him on the field on offense. We've heard from Kirk and the coaching staff about his maturation, just his mental maturity, his leadership, how that's really grown every year he's been in the program. And now with one more year left, I just can't imagine he's coming back to only be a return guy. And if he's only if he only is really seeing the field as a return guy because he's phenomenal, he's a phenomenal return specialist, but he's just got great guys ahead of him on offense, that's maybe the best case scenario. I mean, I would rather the return guy not be a top 3 guy on offense, right?
Sure.
Just from an injury perspective. So if that can happen, great. I would love to see them utilize 5 or 6 different receivers because they're all good.
As our buddy Jackson noted in the chat, we are just 14 shows away from 200. So that's roughly 4 years with Corey and myself. Will this show last long enough for us to see a prolific Iowa offense?
Prolific?
Prolific. Top 20 in the country.
Oh, come on. I don't know that you...
Why can't that ever happen?
Why does that have to be an expectation? They don't need to be top 20.
I didn't say it was an expectation. It would just be interesting. It would be fun to have that conversation for once instead of Jacob Gill at 35 catches. He's by far the standout.
So hard to predict. I would say it's well, who knows how long you and I are going to do this. Now this box elder bug is on my chair. What is going on here? I guess they're back out, Mark, because see this? Should I put it on camera for you? You guys have box elder bugs in
No.
So you don't even know what a box elder bug is? Okay, you don't know what they're totally harmless.
You're just allowing him to have his run of the room.
I mean, he was over here and now he's over here, and
you know what he would look like right now if I were there?
He's not a spider. He's not dangerous. Now, if he starts
I didn't say he was dangerous, but I don't leave bugs just crawl around the house. I usually dispose of them at some point.
I'm sorry you feel that way, Mark. They're not. It's not like a roach. It's not a. They get in the windowsills on, especially in the summertime. Oh, he's still on my wrist. Anyways,
you know what I've encountered here that I've never had to deal with before is I've had about 4 lizards get in the house.
Oh yeah. I see. I'm not aware of that. Like I know people have that problem down there, but I've of course never lived in Florida.
And they're actually not as difficult to get a hold of as you would think. I've been able to just within a couple minutes corner them, box them into something, put them in a box, and get rid of them. But you can't grab them. You can't grab them by the tail because it rips right off.
You don't kill them then?
No, I don't kill them.
Okay.
No.
So you would kill a box elder bug?
I would probably do something close to what you were trying to do there first.
Okay.
But, I traumatized my daughter when I didn't realize this was going to be part of the deal, but she was probably about 10 at the time, and a mouse got in the house, and I just killed it right in front of her. Just got the broom out and just hammered that thing to death.
I'll say this, hoping that this doesn't get anybody in trouble, but this upset me years ago. I was back during high school, I did some construction work during my summer months, just a part-time job. And I remember we were in somebody's basement ripping off some drywall, and there was a bat that was on the wall. And I don't like bats, right? All of a sudden, this guy comes up with a shovel, bang, bang, bang. I'm like, dude, what the heck are you doing? What is wrong with you? I'm pretty sure that's illegal because aren't bats endangered? You don't beat a bat with a shovel. Come on. You don't beat an animal with a shovel.
To be completely transparent about that situation, that's not something I would do right now. But when I was your age, would I have done that? Absolutely, I would have done that.
So you wouldn't have tried to catch it first with with gloves or something?
No.
Bats are good. They kill mosquitoes. They eat the
I would
bugs
have been wailing away at that thing up until about 10 years ago. Probably partially because of my situation with my daughter. I thought twice about it, and I thought, okay, yes, this is a human creature that I should probably attempt to catch first and release.
Yes.
But it was more just, this is annoying. Get rid of it. Bam, bam, bam. Get it out of here.
Bam, bam, bam. Anyways.
So we're doing a series where we are looking at the college football playoff year. So that's 2014 through 24, folks. And that's over on the main channel. And I have fun doing it regardless of how many people watch the videos. I enjoy it because I geek out on stuff like this. So I texted Corey this week to let him know there are some interesting scenarios concerning Iowa. So if you're not aware, the Big Ten and the SEC basically came out this week and in very delicate language basically said, we're going to mandate that we are going to get at least 4 spots each in the playoff going forward, whether that's in a 14-team or a 16-team field. So listen to Iowa's situation and the Big Ten in the past playoffs. So 2014, Iowa's not a factor. Okay, 2015, we know that because of their outstanding year at 12-1 after losing the Big Ten championship game, they're safely in the playoff. No issue there. We move on to 2016. Of course, bad season, nothing there. 2017 at 7-5, not a factor there. We move up to 2018. Iowa did not finish the regular season in the top 16, but they would have had a gripe. You had Florida, LSU, Penn State, Kentucky, and West Virginia all with 3-loss seasons. You had Texas with a 4-loss season, so that would be Iowa's direct competition in 2018. Iowa was 8-4 along with 6 other teams, so you had a log jam of teams that the committee would have had to select from in terms of the playoffs there. Now let's get to a more interesting year here in 2019. So Iowa was number 16 in the country at 9-3 at the end of the regular season. So technically they would have been the last team in the playoff at number 16 and would have played LSU, that Joe Burrow team.
Oh, great.
In the first round of the playoffs.
Yeah.
Yeah, the guy that threw 60 touchdown passes.
Yeah, that'd have been fun. Although that was an Iowa team. I would say that was an Iowa team that I think could have hung with a lot of teams. I mean, they put a big rip through that USC team. So
now if we had our USC folks on here, they would have an argument there.
Oh, I'm sure they got an argument.
They lost a quarterback in that game.
Yada, yada, yada. What was their excuse all of this year for being sucky?
Well, I don't know that they sucked. But anyway.
You don't know if they sucked this year?
Well, they were 7-6. Iowa was 8-5.
I never said Iowa was good either, but I'm saying from a USC standard, weren't they projected as a top 10? Weren't they preseason top 10?
Yeah, close to it.
Okay, well,
okay.
7-6.
We divert.
Huge.
Let's get back to 2019 here. So what would have sucked for Iowa football that year is though number 16 in the country at 9-3, but no group of 5 in the top 16. So you got to move a group of 5 into the playoff. Memphis gets the nod up, and that would have ousted Iowa. Unfortunately for the Hawkeyes in 2019.
Well, you're looking at but hold on. Are you looking at the final regular season poll or the final poll?
The college football rankings. That's what determines who makes the playoffs.
Okay, but I thought you were looking at the post, like the AP poll at the end of the season.
No. The final regular season after championship weekend. I've done these things a few times. I kind of know what I'm doing here.
Okay.
Where he's questioning whether, like, no, this is the third week of the season. Ah, shoot. Yeah. Okay. 2020, of course, the pandemic year. Iowa at number 15 in the country at 6-2. They would have played Clemson in the first round of the playoffs.
Okay.
2-15 matchup. In 2021,
would have made it again.
Number 15 in the country after losing the Big Ten championship game. Number 15 at 10-3. Listen to this. Would have had a rematch against Michigan in the first round of the playoffs. I don't know if they would have gone for that, if they would have maybe massaged
that would have been
a little bit.
That would have been in Ann Arbor then? Is that the new format that they're tinkering with, still having home venues be the sites? Okay. So it had been in Ann Arbor. I'm sure that would have went over well. Yeah, great.
However, listen to this.
Real quick, against Cade, that would have been a rematch against Cade. Go ahead.
Yes, it would have been. However, listen to this. Now, would this not have sucked? And this is one of the reasons why I texted you. It wasn't just, okay, I was number 15. They would play Michigan. They're number 15 here. They play Clemson. The ACC only had one team in the top 16. The stipulation is that they get at least 2 bids. So that would elevate Wake into the top 16, kick out somebody else.
And then G5 didn't have top 16 either.
G5 did, but the SEC only had 3. They need another one as well.
Why? Again, explain to me why we need to have conferences guaranteed.
Because the Big Ten and the SEC are flexing their muscles and saying we need at least 4 teams in.
Stupid. Don't. Look, I'm a Big Ten guy, but that's stupid. Why are we still doing it?
I totally agree with you. Totally agree with you.
The ACC shouldn't get 2 in. There should be no guarantees. Maybe conference champion, I'm okay with that. But after that, it should not matter.
My initial response when I read that was, okay, well, that's the Big Ten and the SEC, bullying the other 2 conferences. But you know what? The Big Ten and the SEC are always going to get 4 teams in. Then I started to go back here and thought, not all the time. No, not all the time. Of course, 2022 was the 7-5 team. This is a good one right here. I love this one. So the Big Ten only had 3 teams in the top 16. You know who would have gotten the 4th? This is probably my favorite of all the teams that would have been elevated into the top 16.
What year?
This is 2022. So you only have Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State. That's pretty much a common theme every year.
Would have been Maryland.
This season, you've got Illinois and Purdue tied at 8-4. So we assume Purdue won the game. That's the Purdue team with Aiden O'Connell that went to the Big Ten championship game. Okay. They would have gotten the 4th. The team that eventually went 8-6 would have made the playoffs. Love that.
They would have been 8-6 with the playoffs. So
yeah, because they lost the Big Ten championship game by 1 million points to Michigan, and then they would have played
someone they would have lost to.
Yeah, they would have. Oh, they would have played Georgia. Yes.
Oh, yeah, that would have went well. Who did they lose to in the bowl game that year?
They lost
LSU?
to
no,
LSU like 63-7.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. In the Outback Bowl.
But they didn't have Rondell Moore and Aiden O'Connell. They had a ton of guys up. You mean
who
was the great
David Bell?
Wide
Not
receiver.
Rondell Moore.
No, that's right. He was 2018. That was Aiden O'Connell and Bell. David Bell. And a few other guys. Anyway, I'm sure LSU missed a bunch of guys too. 2023, see, Iowa would have been right on the cusp. They would have had an argument. There were 4 teams in the playoff, or would have been in a 16-team playoff. LSU, Arizona, Louisville, and Notre Dame at 9-3. Iowa was 10-3, but they were not ranked in the top 16 in the country. So we would have been on here arguing Iowa's case, but
I wouldn't have been arguing. Look, the fact that we having these conversations about the 2021 Iowa team and the 2023 Iowa team, those teams,
I enjoy this.
Were not as good as their record showed.
I enjoy this. So those are
Yeah,
just some of the stipulations there.
Maybe we can get back to our recruiting class
Yes,
recaps next week.
absolutely. And we certainly want to honor Erica's super chat here. Thank you so much for the contribution, Erica. Mark, do you agree with my assessment of what happens if we have a top 20 offense? Which is what? What is your assessment? That you would be really good? I'm sorry,
guessing,
Erica. I did not see your assessment.
Yeah, is it back up somewhere? She says we win the Natty. She says we win the Natty if we have Parker's defense. That's a hard thing to say. Do they make the playoff? Yes. I think it's easy to say I agree they make the playoff, but to say they're going to win the national championship, how good was Ohio State's offense this year? What was its ranking?
It was like 11th.
And how good was their defense?
Number 1.
So again, just because Iowa happens to have a top 20 offense, that doesn't mean that this is what these national championship teams are doing every year. They have top 20 on both sides.
Yeah, Texas was in the top 10 on both sides. Oregon was close. They were like, a top 2 or 3 offense and like 12 on defense. Yeah.
Yep.
In the running, Erica. In the running. Absolutely. Folks, we do appreciate you being here, the voice of college football. And again, catch up with everything that Corey's got going. And if you have yet to do that, this is the time of the year to do that. So, Corey, when are you live next?
I will not be live tonight, but my good buddy Kyle Spence will be hosting with a good buddy of his. So we'll get a perspective of Iowa and Illinois because his buddy, huge Illini guy. And so they'll recap Iowa, Illinois tonight. And then tomorrow I will be live again with Kasheen Alexander. We'll recap Iowa, Michigan women's basketball. So it's the last road game for the Hawkeye women before the Big Ten Conference tournament. And and then of course coverage throughout conference tournament, assuming the men make it and the women have locked their spot in already.
I know I don't watch college basketball anymore, but I'm a firm believer, always have been, that everyone should make the conference tournament. I don't care if you're 0-20, you should be in the conference tournament. That's what it's for. It's a conference tournament.
Well, unfortunately,
that's what this is all about. Cinderella. Let everybody play.
I don't mind the idea. I understand that, but I also don't mind the bottom 3 not getting in. Because I like the conference season meaning something. I mean, I just, besides, especially even for the teams that are not going to make the big dance or that aren't projected to make the big dance as an at-large, play for one thing, and then if you get there, okay, now we can play for the big dance. 18 teams is too many to play in a conference tournament anyway.
15? What's the difference?
The difference is you get rewarded with buys as the top teams, and you don't get if you suck, and you stay home.
Well, you can really suck and still make it at number 15 in the conference.
Yeah. Yes, that's true. But there's still a Cinderella possibility for those teams, the sucky teams from 8 to 15. So there's a lot of good teams in the conference. There's going to be good teams in the conference every year. From the West Coast they added some good teams this year. USC and UCLA are both kind of down, but still dangerous. Oregon's good. Washington's not very good, but so I'm talking about men's basketball, of course. The women's basketball, they got all those teams out west are really good, with the exception being Washington's okay, but the rest of the teams are really good.
All right, folks, we appreciate you being here. Make it on back next Tuesday at 4:30 Central. Bring a friend or 2 or 50 with you. Want to build the audience and grow this as big as possible. All right, folks, we will see you next week.